All right, want to thank you guys for coming here this evening, and for those of you joining us virtually. My name's Sean Becker, and I am the mental health navigator for the West Bend School District. Prior to that, I was a school counselor at Badger for many years, and just excited to host these conversations. This is our first session here on mental health awareness, and specifically on how it impacts families. So again, just want to show my appreciation for you joining. And for our panel, I'm excited to have them share their experiences and expertise here as we go on throughout the night. Before we get into it, what I wanted to do was just go through some basics and kind of set the tone for the evening. And I also need to say, I'm not used to being up here. I'm not used to being videotaped or to have this microphone. So hopefully that'll go well for me. But looking at our overall goals for the session, there we go. It's to learn more about mental health and how to support others who may be struggling through a mental health challenge. Mental health challenge is a newer topic for me, or label. More commonly, we hear them as mental health disorder or maybe a mental health illness. And you'll see me using and more people using the term of mental health challenge. That language is a little, like I said, just a little new. A big reason we're here tonight and hosting these is because we want to normalize the conversation surrounding mental health. We want to reduce or break through some of that stigma and help people feel empowered to seek help when they need it. And that's, again, why I appreciate you guys being here to be a part of that initiative or that process. And then finally, talking about mental health helps us improve our communities, overall. Working in the schools, that's what I'm invested in, is the school community, but then our community at large. It makes it more acceptable for those suffering from mental health challenges to seek help, to learn how to cope with that, and also how to get on the road to recovery, which is where we want everyone to be. Some general guidelines for tonight, really looking at this as a learning environment. So there's a lot of wisdom in the room with our panel, but also with you guys in the audience or joining virtually. And so through that conversation, that's why we really look at this more of a conversation, where it's more than just a one-sided discussion, and just relying on each other for that. As much as possible, we ask that if things are shared, that you do your best to kind of keep them in the room with that, or if a question comes up virtually that we answer, just to respect that confidentiality if you think it's something you shouldn't share outside these walls. And then we want you to be non-judgmental. This can be a very sensitive topic for many. It touches all of our lives in some way. We're going to hear from Steve and Nick Hoffman and their personal experience, and so their lives have been deeply touched by that. And just want to show that appreciation and also that space for that. This session's about gaining more awareness, more comfort, and then also more acceptance with that, or compassion in dealing with mental health challenges. So real quickly to go through the format, we're going to give a working definition of what mental health is, and then with that, the importance of why we need to talk about it, some statistics regarding or surrounding mental health. We're going to hear, as I mentioned, from a family that is living through this or journeying through it right now. We're going to hear from their therapist, who not only works closely with them, but also with other families or individuals. And then also from Katie, another therapist who is an art therapist and works with individuals and groups, but also who is here representing NAMI and can talk later about some of the community resources for individuals and families. I just talked about that, and we're going to, at the end, have some time to answer questions. We had some that were submitted already. We'll go through those, and if anybody in the audience has a question, if you're joining virtually, you can email me. The email link, it will be up at the end on the screen, and then we'll take that question at the end. So as I mentioned, just giving a working definition of mental health. It encompasses our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It affects how we think, how we act, how we feel. It impacts our decisions and how we handle stress, our day-to-day lives, and how we interact with others. So many of you are here because of how that impacts maybe their individual lives that you care about, or social or family, those relationships. Good mental health is vital for our overall functioning and being able to perform our many daily activities. It also enables us to cope with challenges, form those meaningful relationships, and experience a sense of well-being and fulfillment. If we look at mental health, we can look at it on a continuum. So all of us have mental health in our daily lives. And within that, some days you may be on the end of the spectrum where you're not having any impact at all, like you're doing really well, functioning really well. So that's more in the green area on this slide. And then there are other days, as we're moving along that continuum, where we might be in the red or moving towards that area where it's more severe or significant. Or individuals then, if they're experiencing that, they may have what would be labeled as a mental illness or a mental health disorder. And at each of those levels, we just want you to know too, and we'll talk about that tonight, like some of the resources that are available, because even if you're at the green level, there are resources there too just to help you maintain your positive well-being or positive mental health. Some statistics to quickly take a look at. Again, just to look at the significance of mental illness. Probably not a surprise to any of you with the statistics, but 1 in 5 of the U.S. adults experience a mental illness each year. Out of those, then 1 out of every 20 individuals, it is a more serious or significant mental illness. And again, that's on a year-to-year basis. In school-aged youth, that number is 1 out of every 6 students, so ages 6 to 17, experiences a mental health challenge each year. And what I think is pretty important then as well, and why we're here and really want to emphasize early identification or intervention is 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin by age 14, and 75% of those are ingrained by age 24. So again, that importance of intervening early, showing someone that if you notice someone needs some help, to be able to feel comfortable reaching out to them and helping them get that support. And then the final statistic there, again, a real concern is suicide in general for individuals experiencing mental illness, but then in our school-aged youth, again, once they get to middle school, high school, it's the second leading cause of death between individuals aged 10 to 14. So that's why it's important not only in school, but in our community just to be aware of that and to show that support. All right. So as we go on, if you have questions, if you didn't grab a note card, you can raise your hand at the end or go over and grab a note card. If you're joining us virtually, again, you can email. What we're going to do now is switch to the panel, and I'm going to introduce everyone. I had to wait for Steve to get seated over there. He's the main person on our panel. But Steve and Nick Huffman. So Steve, I also want to thank you. He's been really instrumental in putting this all together and kind of kicked me in the butt a couple times to get it rolling. We talked for several months starting last year about pulling together some mental health awareness sessions. So I want to thank him for that. And he's done a great job like sharing his story, not only with me, but also with some teachers so far in some of our professional development sessions. And then his son, Nick, to hear his story will be good as well for us, just to have that personal contact. So I really appreciate the two of you showing that courage, and really I have, you're the brave son I put on your side, Nick, but really brave to be here. I really appreciate that. And again, just to be willing to share your story that can help not only the adults understand how they can maybe better help youth, but also for young people to be encouraged as well. Like, I'm on this journey and things can get better, will get better, right? And then we have Jen Lobenstein. She is a professional therapist from Fresh Perspective Psychotherapy. So she owns her own business in the community here, but she has worked directly with the Huffman family and can talk about that, but then also talk about what else she does to support individuals and other families in our community. So really appreciate her expertise. And then Katie Marver is from, she's an art therapist, so she does that, licensed art therapist, but then she also is here representing NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And so she's going to add some perspective, not only on how she supports families and individuals, but also some of our community sports, particularly through, I think I said sports, community supports, particularly through NAMI and the programs that they offer. So welcome, and again, I thank you for coming here as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is turn it over to Steve, and he's going to share a bit of his story. As it goes on, I'm going to moderate, and then maybe ask all the panel members questions throughout the time to keep it moving. And we're going to go until the plan is until 6 o'clock, and then we're going to just answer questions at that point. So we'll see how things are progressing along that way. And I also want to say that Steve did say he can get a little wordy at times. So we talked about that, so you may have to help me cut him off. I don't think it's going to be like some of the political debates where we have to set a timer, but yeah, just really appreciate Steve and his story. And I've learned a lot from him, and he really is. I put expert dad on there, which Nick kind of laughed about, but he really has developed a lot of expertise in the last several years just in how to manage the mental health challenge for their family, but also more importantly, just how to support Nick through that, and is constantly learning and wondering and improving and growing in that area too. So thanks a lot, Steve.
All right. First, I want to thank West Bend School District just for making this happen. I want to thank you, Sean, for your work in organizing this and planning everything for these sessions. I'm really grateful to be here tonight to share my experience, things that I've learned. Hopefully, it will help some families out there who are struggling with this, and maybe I'm hopeful that it'll bring some purpose and meaning to the difficult times that we've been through as a family. I'm also very grateful that my son, Nick, is here tonight on many levels. I think it's really important to have his perspective, because as much as we think we know, unless you've been through it yourself, we really don't. And so maybe through his words, some parents, some people in our community can take at least a step closer towards that understanding and compassion. And we all know that it's a process. Mental health is a process. Nick is still in that process. We might be a little further along than some of the people listening in, but for him to have the courage, as Sean said, for him to have the courage to be here tonight and share his story, share his pain that he's been through in order to try to help other kids out there and validate their pain. I've been really proud of my son a lot in his life, but I don't know if I've ever been as proud as I am tonight. So all that said, we're here to talk about how it impacts the family. So I thought a good way to start would be talk about me, how it impacted me personally. When Nick was struggling the most for about a year and a half, my wife and I would take turns sleeping. One of us would sleep, the other one would stay up many times all night on the couch or on a mattress outside his bed or outside his room, sometimes on a mattress inside his room, trying to keep him safe. And I often took that time to write what was happening, what I was feeling, my way of trying to cope with everything, trying to make some sense out of the hell that we were going through. And so tonight, I want to read some of what I wrote one of those nights. I titled this, "The Grind." Give me 1 second, I need to drink some water. I wake up every morning already exhausted and stressed, trying to grind through another day. But I'm no match for this grind. I struggle to sleep and eat. The constant fear is debilitating. My entire life revolves around this. I wake up thinking about what's going to happen. I text my wife every 30 minutes to see how things are going. I'm on edge all day long waiting for that phone call saying, "Come home now." I'm dealing with doctors and therapists, programs and insurance every day. I'm trying to modify my own behavior to validate him while not enabling him, trying to control my own fear that he will fall into that deep depression again, yet not allow him to use it to manipulate me. All the while, this enormous cloud of sadness and darkness is hanging over me as I watch my son suffer and struggle, leaving behind dreams and goals and any hope for his future. I sit here on the couch waiting for him to fall asleep so I know he's safe, at least for now. I'm utterly and completely exhausted. If I'm able to sleep for an hour or two, I usually dream about drugs and therapy and death. Then I wake up to repeat and grind through another day. The pain I'm in is so overwhelming that it's easier to suffer in silence and alone than to share that pain with others. Ironically, I watch my son cut himself off from his own friends and from us the exact same way. And I feel how much that hurts. I'm hurting the people I love by not letting them in, even my wife, the love of my life. I wait for the day that it will be different so I can try and repair what I have destroyed. I only have one goal every day: to make it through without Nick having a meltdown and calling 911 again. As long as he can make it through without ending up in the hospital or in jail, I'm happy. No, I'm not happy. I'm just not utterly broken. The reality is, right now, I have no aspirations for my son's future because I'm just grinding through another day. I no longer have goals for my son's life because I'm just grinding. I no longer dream, hope, or wonder who my son will be or what he might achieve. I just pray he can get through the day without wanting to die. I just grind, day after day, grinding through the emotion and the mental exhaustion, grinding through lack of sleep and physical drain, grinding through fear and sadness, through hopelessness and shattered dreams. Before this mental health nightmare, we didn't have to worry about self-harm, drugs, alcohol, running away, raging tantrums, or those cruel body shakes that consume him almost every day. But the worst is the suicide ideation. It's there every single day, from the moment he wakes up until he finally falls asleep. I don't know if I can adequately describe what it feels like to live every day praying your son will still be alive tomorrow. It's emotionally overwhelming and makes me want to curl up into a ball and forget the world. I try to listen to the advice, but sometimes it seems so useless. When your child screams horrible and hurtful things at you because he's in so much pain, they tell you to remain calm and explain to him that it won't get better unless he decides he wants to get better. When your child can no longer take the pain and resorts to self-medication with marijuana or alcohol or self-harm or whatever, they blame him for not using good coping skills. You watch him struggle to accomplish even the smallest of tasks like brushing his teeth or taking a shower. And every month you meet with the doctor to once again tell them how much he's suffering, just to be told to try yet another medication that may or may not work, or might make it worse, or might kill him. I slowly rise from the couch and make my way back down the hall as quietly as possible. Some of the wooden floorboards creak as I walk, and I hope he doesn't hear me. It's now 2:35 a.m. as I once again silently open his door to peek in his room. He's finally asleep. I close the door and walk back to the living room. I can see the crescent moon shining a dim light through the window, illuminating the couch and blanket. I lie down and cover up. Sleeping on the couch or the floor has not been good for my aging body. My back is throbbing and the dull pain in my head and neck has become chronic. I stare into nothing for a long time before I finally close my eyes. And then, just for an instant, Just for an instant, sorry, I lost my spot here. My mind flashes to an image of opening his door in the morning and finding him with a sheet wrapped around his neck. And I force myself to stop, but it's too late. I already feel my heartbeat increasing and the familiar sickness in my stomach. The tears will come and I won't fight it this time. Maybe when the sobbing is over, I'll be able to sleep for an hour or two before I have to go to work. The moonlight is still reflecting off the blanket, but everything seems darker now as I sob, alone, desperate, and broken. Eventually, the tears stop flowing, and I'm able to sleep out of pure exhaustion. One more day, and tomorrow the grind continues. It's been almost 2 years, or over 2 years since I wrote that, and obviously the emotions are still really strong. The way I see mental health challenges affecting the families like this, it doesn't matter how strong you think your family bonds are. When you put that into the fire and the flames of mental health challenges, it's going to burn. And it will burn to the ground and destroy everything you have if you let it. But if you have the courage to stand in those flames alongside your child who's in there suffering, support and love, really love unconditionally, and endure the flames together, then eventually, not today, not tomorrow, probably not for years and years, but one day, those flames will be extinguished. And if you never stop loving and you never, ever, ever give up, then through the grace of the fire and the flames, those bonds will be stronger than they ever were. This is what I believe. And I also know now that night I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of things in this process, but that night when I said those things were destroyed, I was wrong, because hope was not destroyed, our love was not destroyed, and our family was not destroyed. And our dreams are burned and charred, and they don't look anything like they used to, but our dreams are alive too. So when I go home tonight, I will be able to sleep. And tomorrow when I get up, we, as a family, we're just going to keep grinding. I'm not going to stop until those flames are out. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing that. I know it's difficult, and you talked a lot about, just being able to get through it, and I really appreciate you and being able to share that. And I'm having a hard time not being impacted by that as well. And that's, so with mental health, it is such a personal topic, and can be, and especially when it's impacting your family. And it's impacting your family on a daily basis. Where you'll have some days that are good, other days where you're struggling, some days you're really struggling, and you may think, like you had at some point, like, not only are your dreams dead, but are you ever going to be able to dig yourself out of that or save your child? And that's why I appreciate the two of you being here with Nick by your side to say, yeah, we're still continuing this journey. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's still really difficult, but you're dedicated to each other and moving forward, and being committed to that is awesome. And if it's okay, I'll give you a little bit of a break. Yeah. And Jen, I'm gonna ask you a question, and then Nick, I'm gonna come to you, okay? But Jen, I know you came into their lives, and I just want to ask you, like, Steve has shared with me earlier that he knew that he went through many other kind of supports or resources, but when he got to you, he knew that you were someone that would be able to help Nick and his family. And I just wanted to ask you, like, what do you think that was, and what was that like for you to make that connection, and then to see them start making that positive progress and start to dig out of where they were at?
Well, in my experience, I've been a therapist since 2011, and in my experience, like whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, brings the people to the right people to meet them. That has been my experience across the board, and I experience it pretty much every day. There's something that ultimately lands you where you're supposed to be. Now, as they well found out, that took a while. I mean, there were other therapists before me, and that's okay. But apparently, it was supposed to happen like that. Maybe Nick wouldn't have been ready. Maybe Steve and his wife weren't ready to hear the hard stuff. Who knows? There's a reason why it happened when it happened. So just being open as a therapist to literally, you don't know what's going to come out of anyone's mouth, what their experiences have been, and really taking, that's why we ask so many questions, gathering all that information to see what brought them in front of me today, what has already been tried and failed, and then really coming to the conclusion of what have we not done yet, and what might that look like. But the whole thing of building that rapport and that trust, it's not only with the child or adolescent, in this case Nick, it's also with the parents, which I have come to find in my experience, that's imperative. The parents have to be on the same page and be able to trust you as well. And that's not easy to do. You know, it's seriously hard to do. This is their child is in your hands.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, and I think that's really true. I mean, we did go through a lot of different therapists, a lot of doctors and experts, and everything that we possibly could until we landed on Jen, and it was that connection. I think if you don't, if the therapist is not able to make that connection with the child, and I agree with you also with the parents, because it is a family. You have to work together as a family. You have to be on the same page when you're implementing the different strategies. And if you can't make that connection, and I think that was the problem that happened a lot with Nick, is he just didn't connect with the therapist that he had before that. And so that level of trust, well, yeah, I know you're telling me to do this, but I don't trust you, so why am I going to do it? That was a big factor in his ability to start making progress. Even after it helped, but it was a long process before we started really feeling like we were making progress. It just takes a long time to start getting traction. And so you got to have someone you trust, and you got to stick to it for a long time.
And I would imagine, Steve, there are times where you probably felt like giving up, like where you're trying a medication, you're trying a therapist, and it didn't, it's not working, or not working like you hoped or maybe were promised. And then to have to keep coming back to it. And Jen, I really like your point where what I heard from you is like things do line up, and sometimes if you force it, the person may not be ready. That's a question that we had that came up from that was submitted is, like how do you get someone into therapy or into help if they're not ready or they're being resistant to it? And I know Nick and his family were shouting like, help us, help us, help us. So that was a different situation. But can you, or Katie, for you to talk about that too, like how do you support somebody, who's in that journey and they're just not quite there yet where they're open to therapy or even medication or something like that, or even admitting that they need help?
that happens more often than what you'd think, especially with children, adolescents. They don't understand what's going on with them. Um, and, well, it does help that I am a mom of 4 boys and have a lot of nieces and nephews. And so I just have a way of, I can read people's body language and things. It's something that you acquire over time. And instead of, like, sitting down with me behind a desk and them on the other side, and then I'm asking questions and just typing, one of the ways that I do things is I have a great big art table. And I've got coloring pages and paint and literally anything you can imagine. For whatever they want to do, it helps to be able to focus on something else while you're being asked to talk about hard and uncomfortable things. So, but they'll still talk about them because they don't have to look you directly in the eye. So that's one strategy that I use. But also, you know, always finding, I ask a lot of questions, finding things that you have in common with that person to start building that rapport, to start building that trust. You know, if you like fishing, they like fishing, great. Well, what kind of line do you use? And what, like literally, you go into, they need to know, because clearly when you're having mental health issues, whether you're an adult, a child, an adolescent, it doesn't matter, you don't feel cared for. You don't feel loved. You don't even love yourself. So finding something in common with someone else, you have an ally then. And with the therapist, reconfirming and reconfirming that with you, that helps build that rapport, that trust. They start telling you things they would never tell their parents. And even if the hard stuff, you know, there were times when adolescents and children, they want to end their own life. And they told me. No one else, but they told me. And had they not told me, they may not be here. So there's a lot of different things. We're not going to tell you all of our secrets, of course. But there are so many things that you learn over time as a therapist, especially working with kids, because most therapists won't work with kids at all, anybody under 18. I happen to really enjoy it and think it's really important. But so there's a lot of different ways to make that connection, like Steve was talking about, that connection that you need. You need that with anybody that you're actually providing therapy for. If you don't have a connection, it's not going to be effective.
So Nick, we heard a lot from your dad through his story, and I'm really curious about you in listening to that, how that impacted you, but also for you to go through that journey. We don't get to hear from kids a lot. Like, I'm calling you a kid, but we'll think back to when it started. And can you talk about what that was like? Like, when did you really notice that maybe you were struggling more than your friends or other peers? And what was that like from when it started to having to go through feeling that way and really struggling and trying things that weren't working until you got to where you're at, where you're in a much better place?
Well, I was bullied from maybe 6th grade to my sophomore year, maybe even junior year. And basically, my main thing that happened that I noticed was I started losing interest in pretty much everything I did. I have a very nice computer at home. I never played it anymore for months and months, and it kind of just fell off. I loved soccer, and that also just fell apart. I also really enjoyed drawing and writing, and again, that just fell apart. And going into high school, my freshman year was absolutely amazing. I eventually made the varsity soccer team as a freshman, and it was just an experience out of this world. And the seniors on the team helped me a lot. I can't anymore.
I'll take it. So, see, he really connected with the seniors on that varsity team. I think when the season ended, and all the seniors went their separate ways. He felt abandonment from that. Not their fault, but they were seniors. He was a freshman. They didn't have the, and so he entered a phase of really feeling lonely, feeling alone, and it was later that in so the season ended in November, and by January he really started struggling with his mental health and started, like he said, started losing interest. He started his relationships started breaking apart, falling apart, and so it the what I believe in terms of mental health, stress, chronic stress, trauma, all these things, and you never, the easy stuff is like abuse and divorce, and that you can identify. These things like this, you don't, especially with a kid like Nick who kept a lot of things to himself and felt like he could, work through things by himself. You weren't aware of the level of trauma that, the end of a season can bring to a kid. So I think that, like he said, there was a buildup of things, and he was already on the edge, and then he thought throughout that whole season, hey, everything's changing in my life, and I think that was a catalyst moment with him.
So Nick, and if you're not ready, that's okay. But just wanted to ask, so just switching topics a little bit. So during that time, can you talk about some things that maybe your parents did or other people did that helped you, like on your journey to digging yourself out?
Well, to be honest, my parents didn't really understand much. So I resolved to girlfriends, and good friends of mine. Well, I try to get good friends of mine, and eventually, it kind of just. I already forgot what you asked. I'm sorry. I'm everywhere right now.
Yeah, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
So what were things that maybe your parents or other people did for you at that time? Like when, you were talking about your girlfriends,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you were talking with them and that was helpful?
Yeah. A lot of my girlfriends actually were also kind of mentally ill, and we connected on a different level with that kind of stuff. And most of the time, I would have panic attacks, and my girlfriend at the time would either calm me down or just say it's gonna be okay. Stuff happens. It's normal to feel like that, and eventually it can get worse, and sometimes it did, and sometimes you just can't stop it. You just gotta wait, and that's the worst part. But my parents did do a lot of things right though. They understood. What am I saying? I already lost my train of thought again.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So,
I can't.
so
think,
so
dude.
I think one of the things Nick would not come to us with when he was not feeling well, which during that year and a half was most of the days. He wasn't, there was no good days. There was just tolerable days and then intolerable days. But he wouldn't come to us and talk to us. He wouldn't come to us for help. And I'm not gonna question why. It wasn't working for him, and we were there. We were 100% ready to support him any way that we could, but he wasn't comfortable with that. So yeah, he sought out other people, especially because he had a big thing was that neither my wife actually suffers from anxiety, but we didn't understand the level of mental health challenges that he was facing, in his opinion, and therefore we couldn't relate, we couldn't help, we didn't know what to do, and part of that was very much true. Honestly, what me personally, that year and a half, I spent most of my time with him making sure he stayed alive. So that was my number one goal, was just keep him alive day to day. So what I would do is try to find something, even the smallest little bit of hope, to keep hope for him, for some future. Because for him, he looked ahead 2, 3, 10 years and didn't see anything better than what it was, and that was leading straight into hopelessness, and hopelessness means death. So I had to give him some kind of hope. So we got him his own dog, which that dog shows him unconditional love better than any one of us ever will. And we managed to get him opportunities to meet some of his soccer idols. So we planned that out a year, 2 years in advance. And we said, hey, you're going to be able to meet these guys and talk to them and get their autographs and pictures. So that gave him something, something to look forward to. And then, the tattoo, he said he wanted to get a tattoo when he was 18. So we said, well, you can have it when you're 18, you can have it. So we designed this, which represents the three of us together, our family, and a mental health ribbon. And we all three of us got it when he turned 18. So those were the type of things that we could do as parents to try to help him get through. But the day-to-day stuff, it was a lot of us just watching him suffer. It was, you talked about the panic attacks when he would have sometimes days 4 or 5 panic attacks in a row.
6 to 8.
Yeah, and it was just, he would be shaking for hours and hours uncontrollably. It was really, really bad, and there was nothing we could really do except say we're here.
Nick, what would you want to say to a young person that would be helpful to them? Like if they're going through a struggle like you are, but when, going back a couple years ago, is there anything that you could say to a young person that might give them hope or encouragement, or just some advice for them?
Try and find things that you enjoy, especially with just experiment with a bunch of stuff, writing, drawing, coloring, gaming, all these other stuff, and see if it works for you and see if you enjoy it. And if it truly does you enjoy it, pursue it. I pursued writing for a very long time, like music, lyrical stuff. I still have a bunch at home. I went to residential, and all I did was write and draw. I had maybe 30 to 40 songs. So, and then another thing I just wanted to say is just don't give up. You just got to keep trying. You just got to keep pushing forward.
When we did that, there was, I was going to mention that, I forgot it. Thank you for bringing it up. I said that I begged Nick many times, just don't give up. I didn't know. I didn't know if we'd ever figure out anything that would make things better. But I just asked him, don't give up, and I will do everything I can for as long as I can to make things better for you, to get you feeling better. And I mean, that's ultimately the key. Things will get better, but it's really hard for them to see that, because they're going through this dark valley of hopelessness, and they don't see any light at the end. And it's really difficult for them to say, I'm just going to keep trying and failing and falling and crawling and, getting scarred up and everything else. It's tough.
So Nick, I appreciate your strength and just showing that that perseverance. Like you talked about, just not to give up. I think that's great advice for everybody. Is there anything you'd like to say to the parents? Like, again, looking through your lens as a child, that maybe parents could know that, like, well, here's what to look for, or here's something I wish that maybe would have been handled differently. And I'm not saying your parents did anything wrong, but just like if there's something that maybe would have been more helpful to you, or that you say like, hey, parents, don't give up, keep checking in with them, anything like that.
So when I used to self-harm, I had an incident where I was doing it, and I can't remember if it was mom or dad. Either one walked in. It was you. Walked in. I don't think he said anything. I think he just walked out. In that instance, I would have loved for him to just come up to me and just grab the razor, do something, just talk to me, say, let's talk. It's just something. And when he walked away, it felt like, again, abandonment. It felt like he didn't care. And it brought me down even further.
I'll step in on that. So it was me. I walked in, and Nick had been self-harming for some time. Obviously, we knew about it. He didn't hide it from us or from anyone. Actually, I got to give him incredible credit for, I remember this one time he had self-harmed the night before, and his arm was all scars already, and he had self-harmed the night before, and he had an interview at Menards, and he went with a short sleeve shirt. And I said, you sure you want to go with short sleeves? And he said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm dealing with. If they don't accept it, that's their problem, not mine. So I give him a lot of credit for that. That particular incident, I never in my wildest dreams thought that. I looked at that and said, if I walk in there, because this has happened many times before that, and probably after that, that I did step in, and it went badly, right? So Nick, in those moments, the emotion is so incredibly strong in him. He's pure emotion. I mean, there is no reasoning. You can't talk to him. You can't talk him out of anything, because it's just pure emotion that's going. And most of that emotion is a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, a lot of very heightened emotions. So if you step in, that emotion gets directed right back at you. And it took me a long time not to react to that, because it was hurtful. I mean, he would, not physically, but verbally, he would attack me, and it was hard for me not to attack him back and say, "Hey, I'm your father," and all that stuff. So it often escalated really fast and really out of control, and often ended up in 911. And I looked at that and I said, "I don't want this to go to 911. I don't want to have him go to inpatient again, because inpatient was not good."
But there was also times that you threatened to call 911.
Yes.
I don't quite remember exactly what happened, obviously, but there was multiple times where I would do something. Actually, there is one case I remember. There was a time I wanted to overdose, and they have a safe in their closet, and the closet's locked, and obviously the safe is locked, and I somehow managed to get into the closet to steal the case and threaten to throw it out my window. And they obviously threatened to call 911.
We did call 911 that time.
You did?
Yeah, that time yeah.
I don't remember that.
But there were many times where, one of the things, and this is one of the questions on here, something about punishment. How do you punish someone with ADHD or mental illness or something like that? And what I learned from Jen, very much, I always believed this, but it was very hard to put into the practice, was natural consequences are always better than our consequences. So, like, we did in the beginning, we would take his phone away, or we would take his computer away, or we would, have our punishments, which really did nothing except really aggravate him even worse. But the natural consequence, and 911 was a natural consequence. If he continued in a certain behavior, we did not have a choice, because he was putting himself at risk or putting us at risk. And so we would have to call 911. It wasn't, and we tried to say it that way. Of course, his perspective is always different than what we imagine. But what we would say is, if you continue with this, we have no choice but to call 911 in order to keep you safe. And what that meant was 911 would come. That meant possibly going to inpatient. Inpatient was something we absolutely did not want to do. He went 3 times, and each time was worse than the time before that. It was just not a good experience for him, and he didn't want to go back, and we didn't want him to go back. So sometimes, yes, we said, look, please stop, because if you don't find a way to stop, we're going to have to call 911. There were also times. There was a time, I don't know if you remember, that you walked out of the house with a bottle of alcohol in the middle of winter. And we chose not to call 911, which was an incredibly difficult decision to make, because we didn't know what that could have resulted in. But there had to be his own natural consequences, and he had to find his way. You can't, when they're going through that valley, you can't carry them. You can't put them in a bubble and protect them, otherwise they never get through it. They got to find their way through it, and unfortunately, in the process, they get beat up really bad going through that valley, and some really, lifelong things can happen, and the risk of even death is in there. So as a parent, to step back and not do something is really, really difficult, but it's the only way he gets through it.
So Nick, it sounds like at times their stepping in and trying to help out actually just made it worse, right? And you were sharing a story about that. I'm wondering for you, like, at what point or to what degree did grace or forgiveness play in your journey in healing? Like, for you to forgive yourself or to give your parents grace, like knowing, like, and as a parent, I have 2 boys that struggle with mental health as well, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And like Steve shared, like, there are times where I've gotten into trying to help, and it just turned into a power struggle that got out of control real quickly. And I know that's happened with you. So yeah, just to go back to like that grace to forgive yourself or give yourself more understanding and space, but then also for your parents.
Well, my perspective on all of this, it's very weird. Ever since I got onto this new medication called lithium, it kind of just changed everything. It really made things foggy, and I don't really remember when my forgiveness phase was, or like whenever I actually felt forgave, I guess. But damn, I can't remember anything. What?
But so there was a point though where you where you forgave yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. And then what about with your parents?
It might be a work in progress.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, Jen, I want to ask you, coming back to you, just if you're working with a family who's in a similar situation, what is something that you would say to them, or if you're not working with them now, but just to say, here are some things that can be helpful, or what direction you might point them in if it's a similar struggle to what Steve and Nick have shared?
Well, one of the biggest things is, which is really hard to accept, no one else can fix them. And try as you might, Steve learned you can't fix them yourself. It's so hard though. You don't want to see your child in pain, mentally, physically, in any way, but you have to accept you can't fix it. There's literally nothing you can do. You can be super supportive though, but then there's this fine line between being supportive and enabling. So where does that lie? And that's why I also say you have to find yourself a therapist that is willing to like work very closely with you, with the child, and the parents. It is extremely important because otherwise, I would see Nick on his own. I would see Steve on his own. I would see Sandra on her own. I would see Sandra and Nick together. Like it was a combo deal. Like whatever worked that day is what we did. And the other thing is, can get really hard too. For, gosh, quite some time, I saw Nick twice a week. For, gosh, what was it, like a good year? Twice a week. So mom and dad are bringing him to the office twice a week. And then he graduated to once a week, and now we're down to every other. And sometimes there's even an extra week that we don't see each other because he's doing amazing. So, but there's, we all need a little, be held accountable for whatever we're doing and make sure that we're still staying where we need to be. So, like, whatever therapist you get with, ask them every single question you can think of to make sure that whatever they're thinking and their approach is going to, like, match you. You're going to have to hear some hard things sometimes, but you have to be willing and open-minded enough to be like, well, I've never been through this before. I don't know what this looks like. I'm going to trust her or him, whatever that looks like. But also, the therapist also needs to work very closely with the schools and with the counselors and whoever else is involved, and also any of the providers, psychiatrists, or even primary care doctors, or sometimes social services is involved, or like juvenile PO. There's so many different things, and that does take time, and not all therapists are willing to do that. So sometimes us human beings, we have a problem with silence. Sometimes nothing needs to be said. Actually, a lot of the time, nothing needs to be said. Literally, a hug, they'll feel you. They will feel your caring radiating to them. Sometimes saying things out loud, there's so much confusion up here already that it confuses things more, and then they may lash out. So, like Steve said, make sure, don't give up. Keep trying different things to see what works with your child. Because with every child, it is different. It's very personal. And there's always a different reason why they're sitting in front of you. So I also encourage parents to always do their own research to very, reliable sources, of course. Because there might be something out there that I'm not telling them in the moment that they may need. And you'll be led to that too.
Well, and Jen, you talked a lot about the importance of that connection and that relationship, and also, you didn't say this directly, but giving yourself permission if that connection isn't there with the therapist you're working with, to be able then to find somebody else, knowing that there will be a better fit.
Absolutely, and a therapist that might not be a good fit should always give them referrals to somewhere else in the community. That's part of our ethics. I always give at least 3 and usually more referrals to different places based on whatever their level of care need is.
So Katie, can you talk about, you've been very patient, and I appreciate that, but what are some keys to a family or an individual finding their way back to a state of good mental health or well-being? It's a deeper question.
Yes. So some keys to finding that. Well, like they've all said, it takes time and a lot of patience, and just and not giving up. And I think, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, or repeating what you've already said, that for everybody it's going to be different. What is the the key, or what's going to click for someone. And so we don't always know that. And sometimes when the child, I've in private practice as well, and the child might click with the therapist, but one or both parents doesn't, and so that's very difficult too. And I think, if you don't mind me kind of speaking to that a little bit, is that especially in blended families, I think it's very important for all the adults and the parents involved to remember that you're doing this for the best interest of the child. That it's not about who's right or wrong as the parent, but it's about the kid, and being able to listen and to come together for the sake of the child. And if you know that the child has a good relationship with a therapist, to give that therapist a chance to work with them and to give it a shot, because the kid isn't going to always click with everybody, and if they do have something and you force them to go to somebody else, it can be kind of traumatic. So I think it's really important to remember that the child's well-being is what's at stake here, and to go from there. The key, how many key points. Just taking the time, and like Jen had said too, listening. You don't always have to feel the science or fix something. Some of the questions related back to, how do you help your kids, and sometimes it's just listening. And so I think developing a relationship even before there's a mental health issue, of that your child can come to you and you can listen and not judge and just be open. I mean, part of why it works for kids to talk to a therapist is because we've been trained, and we have this where we don't judge, what they're saying, that we're just with them. Like Steve had said too, that sometimes you just be with them in the moment, and it's not a judgment. It's just the way it is, If a kid is feeling a certain way or something's happening, that's the truth. That's their truth. And so just being with them and asking them. They're their own experts a lot of ways. Like, you can ask them, what do you need, or what would you want from me? How, some will say, I don't know, and some will tell you exactly what they want. I just, a lot of times they'll say, I just want you to listen. Or when there's that extreme anxiety and panic, like whether it's hold my hand or sit with me or whatever that is. I mean, breathing is the key tool that all of us have that I think needs to be used more. The deep belly breathing and the different kinds of yogic breath that can help. Maybe not when you're in a severe panic situation like Nick has been talking about. Then it's beyond that, but when it's starting to build up, to help with that.
So finding strategies that work early on and trying those and find out what works for you, which is a personal thing, because belly breathing may work for you, but may not be the key answer for me either. Yeah. All right. So
I just want to chime in a couple of things. First of all, you said about patience. It's a process, and it's a long process, and things happen very slowly, much slower than any of us want it to, and it's really hard to look at it and say, I want him to be here, and he's not there yet, and to have the patience to say, he will get there, and that faith, and it's hard as a parent, because we want to fix things, we want to, him to be good, and we want to always, the best for him. So it's really hard to watch him go through this journey. Second thing, I forgot the second thing I was going to say. Sorry.
It'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I think that another thing is to remember that it's not a reflection on you as a parent. What they're going through, if they've got an illness or they've been in experiences like being bullied or having some other kind of traumas happening, that's not about the parent. That's about the child. And so it's not, you don't need to be embarrassed or to kick yourself around or to feel like, what did I do wrong? And that it's just get beyond that point and just be present and not worry what others think.
So we're going to get to some of the other questions. And I want to start with, I had one, no, I just lost it. So we'll go with, how do you confront a teen or young adult child whom you believe needs counseling for mental health? How do you open that conversation? How do you show that you care? How do you maybe help them connect with somebody that could be a support for them? And I'll open up to any one of you. And what I'm going to do is see if there's anybody in the audience who has a card, and I'll grab the extra questions so we can get those as well.
I guess as far as confronting someone, a child, it depends who you are in relation to them. That's a pretty broad situation. If you're a parent and you think that your child could potentially benefit from therapy of some sort, you want to make sure it's not something that is going to feel like they have to be defensive against. Like, so-and-so, maybe their cousin, has gone to therapy, and actually, like, they just talk to their therapist, like, kind of like their friend, just get things off your chest, and leave it up to the therapist to ask the questions, gather the information, decide what may or may not be going on with that child, and then move forward from there. Because a lot of times, especially if they're in their teens, and a parent tries to just be helpful, in that child's mind, parents are the enemy. They are not going to listen to a thing you say, and they will buck it at all costs. They don't care. But if somebody from the outside who they don't perceive as an enemy comes in and, well, looks like you got some depression going on or some pretty significant anxiety, maybe social anxiety, how about we try this? And we have a way of, approaching things and learning about each client specifically what might be the best approach so that they would respond the way we would hope they would. But as far as like the parents, probably not a thing. If you're a teacher, I would definitely say bring it to like the school counselor. They can reach out to the parent. But I like how it says, how do you open that conversation? Well, what would you think about it? Or do you have any friends that see a therapist or a counselor? Or I heard that you kind of found stuff that, well, okay, not all of them, but some of us are a little more unorthodox, and I don't want to be bored in a session either. That's like my biggest thing. I do not want to be bored, so we do all kinds of unorthodox things. But it gets them to open up. They get to do something else while they're talking, and that makes such an enormous difference.
So the one thing I will say, if you're going to talk to your child, which is something I wish I had done different. I blamed Nick too much for everything, and then I blamed myself too much for everything. And in the end, I didn't have anyone else to blame, so I blamed God. But in the end, I had to realize that there is no one to blame. That there's I don't believe that there's anything wrong with them. I don't believe they're sick or they're ill, or I don't like the mental illness. I like the challenge. I believe that their brains work differently than the other 80% of us. And so if you're going to approach them, let them know there's nothing wrong with them. Just they will benefit from having someone who understands, guide them through, because this teen and young adult age, our emotions are all turbulent. These kids just struggle a lot with their emotions. And if they learn how to manage those emotions, when they learn how to manage those emotions, then look out. Then they whatever they decide to do in this world, they crush. But they have to get there. And lots of times they just don't know how to get there because we don't have really clear paths for these kids to reach there. So that's the first thing I think. I remember what I was going to say to you. Now I forgot again. Oh my God, I'm getting as bad as you.
So while you're thinking of that, Steve, Nick, I have a question for you. So to go back to school, so you said your freshman year was great. And then the question is, how did your attendance, how did your grades change after that? How did, school, how did it really impact school then?
Well, after freshman year, it kind of just, sophomore year was okay. I don't remember, was it junior year that I left?
Second semester, sophomore year is when you went into inpatient the first time.
Okay.
So that's where it kind of
And
started
then,
falling apart.
junior year, I pretty much just almost dropped out. I was just, 6 months of the year, I was not even there. And then senior year, I hardly even went again. Grades were just non-existent, just horrible. Attendance actually was okay. I just didn't pay attention. And I think that was it. That was it, right? That's all you asked.
So correct me if I'm wrong on this, Nick. I'm just guessing because we haven't talked about this, but I think you were spending so much energy, so much time, and so much thought trying to get through the day that school really didn't matter. The assignments
Yeah.
really didn't matter, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was literally kind of survival mode.
Yeah.
And when you're in survival mode, you don't really care about, George Washington or any other
Yeah.
subjects that are in school
Or math.
or math. I do remember now. Skills. You talked about learning skills that will help, and Nick learned a lot of different skills. Some he uses, some he could use a lot more. The one thing I would say, and Nick's starting to try to work on this, I think, is you need to, when Nick was really bad for that year and a half, a lot of those skills didn't matter because he was already, he was in a panic attack within seconds of waking up. So he didn't even have a chance to try to use any skills to prevent it from happening because it was boom, and then it was all day long like that. So, but when he started, we got some better medications for him, and things started becoming somewhat controllable. What he needs to, what I think all kids need to learn is to practice those skills when you're not having anxiety, when you're not having depression, when you're not angry. Because just like sports, and Nick will understand this, you can't learn a move and then just go out into the game and use it and never practice it and expect to be able to do it in the game. You have to practice it when you're not in the game, and then when you do have it, your brain will automatically go there and do it. So that's where practicing meditation or mindfulness, practicing breathing, practicing these things when you're not having anxiety or depression, that's a big key to managing mental health.
So Nick, back to you for another question, because you're I was going to say the youngest, but almost the youngest one here. Is Sydney still here? No. So you're the youngest one here. How did social media impact your mental health during that time? Or, the internet or, any of that? Because we know that has a direct impact, but, just speaking from your experience.
Well, like I said before, I have a computer at home. So the computer was not the problem. It was my phone. My phone and Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, all these other social media platforms, kind of just, I don't even know how to explain it. How do you explain that?
Is it negative or positive?
It was negative. It's definitely negative. It was I'm an empath, so when I see somebody, for example, if I see somebody getting hurt, I feel it. I can physically feel that. And it's kind of the same way with social media. When you add somebody new on Snapchat, for example, and they just say hey, and then you say hey back, and they just leave you on red and just don't talk to you anymore. It hurts, and that happened to me repeatedly and like forever, and it kind of just broke my self-esteem. It just broke me down, and that's kind of when I had all the girlfriends, but again, that didn't end well. So
Yeah, I can remember one instance. He doesn't probably even know that I know this, but he no, it's not bad. He texted out something about not doing well, and for the entire night or for hours and hours, nobody answered him, and it really hurt. On the flip side, Snapchat, as much as I hate that app, it was a little bit of a lifeline for him at certain times because he had certain friends that he would talk to, and those they were looking out for him. And so when he was suicidal, that was he would not tell us that he was suicidal ever to this day, but we knew about it because his friends were looking out for him. So it's tough. It's not a good thing, but at the same time, when you're in that boat, we had to. There were times where we wanted to take Snapchat away. There was time we took Snapchat away, but we gave it back because of that, because it was our only way of knowing when he had a plan.
So we got to maybe 2 of the questions out of the 12. And we knew that time would go quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we post it on our website under the resources. We'll have the questions listed and then more direct answers for those specifically. But what I want to do in the last few minutes, and we'll start with Katie and just go down the line. I asked you earlier, and it's the last question on there, what's one thing you wish you knew? And it could be going way back to when you were getting into the field, or last week, what's one thing you wish you knew? And for Nick, for you to think about that too, like at any point in your journey, what's one thing you wish you knew that would have been helpful or would be helpful now if you knew that?
So for me, with my own family and family members, I did social work for quite a few years, and I was used to working in crisis mode. And one thing I wish I knew back then with my family is that how it would affect my relationships with my family, using my social work skills on my family members, how that would affect our relationships.
Like I said, I've been doing this since 2011. I said I have 4 sons, and it was like the second semester of college time, because he was in college. Well, both my older ones were at the time. At Stephen's point, I had no idea that my second oldest, who's now 21, was spiraling into a very deep depression. No clue at all. And I have 2 younger ones at home. And I wish I would have known when everything came out was only just because all of a sudden one night he's like, Mom, I'm on, what is it called? Suspension, like academic suspension or whatever. You're what? What do you mean? Like, totally blown away. No clue at all. And of course, I'm feeling helpless as a mom, but I'm like, here I am, a mental health therapist, and I didn't even know what is wrong with me. Like, but there's that distance, and so I'm like, I know I've done everything I could possibly do to instill the right things in my boys, raise them right, and I don't like to blame everything on COVID because everything is not COVID's fault, but it did definitely put a damper on things. And that son of mine, he's a solid introvert the way it is. So then when COVID came around, oh my goodness, like they had to wear their masks from from their room to the bathroom 2 doors down the hall in their dorms. So there was like everybody was like covered up. There was no like identity, and it just got generic. And he did end up getting let back in there because I got him into therapy, not with me, but I got him into therapy, and his therapist wrote a letter to the school and everything. But then ultimately, right before he was supposed to go back to Stevens Point, he changed his entire career path. Now he goes to Marine Park in a completely different major, but he's thoroughly happy, and he has been able to work and pull out of the depression. But like, if your child is like further away from you, or even like you were saying before, like even in blended families, when your kid goes from your house to the other house, and you don't always see what the other parent sees, so it's important, even if you don't like each other, do it for the kids.
One thing I wish I knew was that actions have consequences. Because when I was in that year and a half that my dad was talking about, I didn't really see like consequences at anything at all. I would smoke, I would drink, and have I just didn't see the problem in it. And now that I'm sober, I'm finally realizing that it was probably a horrible, horrible mistake to begin with.
All right, I'm gonna go back to that. Try to end on the most positive note here that I can. Talking about the fact that it's not their fault. 80 statistically, 80% of us will never experience mental health challenges like this. And I think that's because we live in this box that we built, full of rules and expectations and consequences and structure and logic and stuff, and it works really well for us. But for people like Nick, they don't just think outside the box, they live outside that box. And they can't live inside the box. It doesn't work for them at all. And we look at them and think, they just don't fit in, they don't belong, they're different, they're crazy. And they look at us and they think, I don't belong, I don't fit in, I'm different. But the thing is, the real crazy part is because they live outside the box, they're capable of things that the rest of us never are. And to me, the greatest minds and the most beautiful souls that ever walked this earth have first walked through that dark valley of mental health challenges. People like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Michael Phelps, Einstein, Tesla. It goes on and on. So if I had one wish for parents out there, if your child is struggling with a mental health challenge, I wish we could celebrate that. Because when they finally get through, and I know it's hard, it's really, really hard, and it's really long, but when they get through and they step back into the light, they don't come back into just the ordinary light of that box. They come into the most beautiful, most brilliant light this world has to offer. And so I can't wait. I cannot wait for that day that the flames are out and my son steps back into his light, because I know, absolute certainty, I know it's going to be brilliant.
Steve, thank you for that as a positive way to end, but also to provide that hope again and to really build that and encourage that resilience. We're winding down, and it seems like we're just getting started, though, where we could sit here for hours yet and just process through these questions and these experiences. And I want to thank you all for being willing to be a part of this. Steve, thank you for that and all that you shared. Nick, for you. I know at times it was difficult, but I really appreciate you being here for us and to help everybody learn from you. And Jen, thank you for your expertise and involvement, and same for you, Katie. Appreciate that as well. Yeah. And it is like we have a ways to go. We have a few more of these planned, so once a month through April, and our next one's going to be how mental health impacts school. So we're going to have a panel as well, another family sharing their experience directly to when it started and then how it impacted school. So maybe more of that schoolwork, attendance, and getting through that and wanting to give up. And then we're going to, after that, have a general session on just helping parents or families with more of strategies, like support strategies. And then the one after that is going to be on coping skills and strategies. It's going to be on building hope and building resilience. And so going from there. And then we have a date open in April that we didn't schedule yet. So we're looking for, ideas too. If you have any suggestions, you can let us know something that you would like to hear us talk about or pull people together to talk about. And I appreciate you being here as part of the community too, and walking alongside of us with this. And tonight we talked about families and a lot of with kids, but really some of this stuff is transferable to anybody that you might be worried about or concerned about. To give them the message that there is hope. It can get better. It might be a long time, like Steve said, and a difficult journey at times, but there are a lot of people and resources around, and we didn't get to those. I know I was going to have Katie talk about their role specifically with NAMI, but that's something we'll put into the resources as well. And as a school district, part of my job is to help not only students, support them, support families, support the staff. We've been doing many things the last couple years, starting kind of with trauma and how that impacts students, but also mental health and focusing on, we did a session not too long ago on anxiety and depression, just general overall mental health, and we're continuing that work within our school district here, but then want to spread it out to the broader sense and do more parent education. So if you're able to join us in those other ones, just know that they're available. And if you have any questions afterwards, we're available if you have anything you need to talk about. But thank you for coming. I do want to be cognizant of, like Steve said, thanking the West Bend School District for allowing us to do this. I'd like to thank Superintendent Wimmer for her support. Emily Malstrand, who's our Student Services Coordinator. She was here a little while ago, but thank you for her support in this as well. And then Nancy Kunkler was instrumental in helping Steve and I just market this and put things together and put resources on the website. So I appreciate her work in that too. And our hope is that through these sessions, you're able to learn some things. I heard a while ago, when we know better, we do better. And that's kind of our goal too, is just to help us all know better, know more, so that we can support each other. Maybe it's our family members we have to support, or just someone we notice like at work or in our community or our extended family that just needs us to reach out to them. And I want you to know, you're not alone in this. There are a lot of people that, can be available and are available. And if you ever need that, feel free to reach out to any one of us or to myself too. My information's up there, but is available on the district website too. And just a reminder, I said this, but just to know that those resources will be posted soon, as will this video if there's anyone that could benefit from watching it. So